Hi everyone, welcome to today's webinar sponsored by HighLevel Partners. We are waiting on a couple more attendees, so we're going to give it a few more minutes just to let them log on. Okay everyone, so welcome to today's webinar sponsored by HighLevel Partners. Today's topic is how to turn your competency compliance into a competitive advantage. This is the first in a series of webinars sponsored by HighLevel Partners. My name is Ashlyn Plasquelic and I am the head of marketing at HighLevel Partners. We will be joined by our two speakers today, Jai Shaw and Tom White. Their contact information is on that screen that we have up for you. You can also find them on LinkedIn. Before I hand it over to our speakers, just a quick housekeeping item. The way that we will be handling questions throughout the webinar is through our question box in the GoToWebinar screen. It is that box on the right side of your screen. Some of you may have minimized that. So just pull it up and type in your answers into the question spot. We will be keeping track of those questions throughout the entire webinar, and we will answer them at the end. Depending on time, we may not be able to get to all of them, but we will answer your questions offline, so look for those in your inboxes. Okay, so today to get started, I will introduce our two speakers. Jai Shaw is a managing partner at HighLevel Partners and currently serves as the head of technology solutions. He has over 20 years of experience in architecting software solutions. His portfolio includes ERP and custom developed software delivered to large multinational corporations. Mr. Tom White is a senior HCM consultant for HighLevel Partners. Tom has been with us for 3 years, and he specializes in Kahuna and works side by side with our clients to make sure that their experiences are outstanding. So let's welcome our first speaker, Jai Shaw.
Good afternoon, everybody. I am happy and really excited to talk to you today about competency management and kind of the renewed focus that we're seeing among our customer base in competency management. It's a very important topic for us as a company and for our customers. So it's something that we have taken seriously and really kind of seen an opportunity in the marketplace to pursue further. So it really starts by defining what competency management is from our perspective, and the semantics around this really do matter because competency management can be a very broad topic. And how we've defined competency management is the entirety of assigning, assessing, and tracking the knowledge, skills, and experience required to perform specific activities. So this is a more granular version of competency management than many HR professionals are used to. When we think about competency management maybe from a performance evaluation perspective or a performance management perspective, we may be thinking about simply the leadership or behavioral traits relative to various job functions or families. In this case, we're taking this down a level to the very technical skills, certifications, requirements relative to job tasks. And from a business process perspective, there's several things involved in competency management. It involves the creation and management of your actual catalogs, so the inventory of the competencies that you want to manage, the mapping of those competencies to specific roles within your organization, the assigning and management of the roles to people, the identification of the gaps that exist in your organization from a competency perspective, the development of your employees against those gaps, and the assessment process as a whole relative to competencies. So it's a broad business process that requires special attention. Why is this really coming into vogue at this point? Is we're finding among our customers that there's an increasing gap between the expectations of operations and the delivery of HR when it comes to understanding the actual skills and knowledge of the workforce. This is more prevalent, most likely, in heavily regulated industries or industries that have safety critical roles within them. But the fact is, this really is a cross vertical challenge, and the challenge is really becoming in more and more into focus because of a fairly large demographic shift in the workforce. We have as has been well chronicled, we have a senior workforce that's exiting. We have a gap then between that senior workforce and the millennial boom, where we've got this gap in skills and experience, and the passing of knowledge from the senior leadership of the company, the senior technical resources to that next generation of workers is increasingly more important because of the focus on regulation, because of the focus or reliance on contingent workers in many of those roles, because of the highly skilled environments and challenges of the workplace today in industries such as oil and gas. So operations is seeing this and saying, wow, I have risk. If I can't close that risk or mitigate that risk, I'm going to be in trouble. And HR is struggling with their current suite of tools, be it performance management or learning systems that are very focused on the traditional HR functions to satisfy what operations is asking for, which is a true evaluation of the gaps among the technical skill set or competencies required to do the job and get the job done. So obviously, the solution that we feel is germane or very central to solving this problem is a formal competency management framework and process. And it really is the only way to objectively measure and analyze the gaps that exist within the workforce, and more importantly, to use that information about the gaps in competence to drive all other investments from an HR perspective, from a career development, from a recruiting, from a learning perspective. All of that should be predicated on solving or fulfilling the competency gap that exists within the operational world today. And really the motto we kind of strive for is the right employee in the right job at the right time. And you could even extend that to the right worker in the right job at the right time, because we feel like this is just as important for contingent work, managing the contingent workforce, as it is the direct employee of the company. So obviously there's a cost in doing this. There's an investment that has to be made, but we feel like the opportunity is that investment would be kind of buoyed by, or the balance of that equation far outweighs that cost. So what's the cost involved in doing this? Obviously, you have to have a handle on your jobs and your roles and the technical makeup, the job task analysis relative to any given job that's being performed, and that's not an easy task. Inventorying that formally and coming up with competency catalogs that make sense and are manageable and that could be leveraged across different disciplines within your organization in a similar fashion or different locations, that takes effort. There's no doubt about it. There's also the whole act of performing assessments and the investment in that. But if you really stop and think about those two activities, one could argue that companies are already doing this. They're doing it informally, but they're doing it. There are countless spreadsheets or offline systems where different locations, for compliance reasons, for audit reasons, for just sheer, different initiatives that operations has taken on, saying, hey, we really need to get a handle on what it takes to be, X, Y, or Z within the field, have taken on this task. The problem is that nowhere is that information being aggregated. Nowhere is it being used to drive other processes within the organization. The other thing is, if you think about supervisors and team leaders, specifically in operations, again, where their safety critical jobs or other task driven jobs that are being performed or roles that are being performed, they know their staff. They know, that person X is capable, whereas person Y isn't, and maybe needs mentorship or supervision. They inherently know that. Again, the problem is it's in their heads. It's not cataloged anywhere. It's not formally being tracked. And that information, when tracked, is extremely valuable to the organization. So really, the question is, if we ask supervisors and team leaders to simply manage their staff, but do it in a more formal way, and we provide tools that allow you to aggregate this information and turn that information into the basis for making critical decisions around your staff, the way to deploy your staff, the way to manage risk, to focus your learning investments, to engage your employees in a development path, to balance your shift, do things as tactical as schedule the next shift and make sure that you're compliant on that shift. And then provide a consistent measurement process across the organization. It's very hard to argue that there's not value in pursuing what is already really being done, but just formalizing it. And really, again, thinking about the topic of today's webinar, which is turning your compliance burden into a competitive advantage, we're doing this today. We're just doing it in a way that doesn't allow for all of the competitive advantage part of the equation to be extrapolated from that activity. So really, to make this work, we feel at Hula, there are tools and applications and supporting processes that are very, very key. We have developed a tool called Kahuna that is a competency management application, really focused on providing an end user experience that allows this to happen in a way that users will participate. Because ultimately, participation is critical to success in this world. If you don't get participation from the end user, these programs inevitably fall on their face, because as we know, that the data that's put into the system is really what's going to drive success. So we'd like to take a few minutes to share with you the user experience and how Kahuna operates and is used to support competency management as a whole. And then we're happy to take some questions and talk about kind of anything that might be on your mind, either from a process perspective or an application perspective. So I'm going to turn the meeting over to Tom White, who's going to take us through a brief demo of Kahuna.
Okay, hello everyone, and thank you, Jai. So as Jai mentioned, I'm just going to walk us through a brief high-level demo of our system Kahuna, really from three perspectives. I'm going to start out from the individual contributors, just the baseline assessed employees perspective. Then I'm going to look at it from a supervisor or an assessor's perspective, and then take a one step higher view from an executive dashboard perspective, and really talk about how we have taken these problem statements and applied them to a system to solve for the compliance issues, and then build upon this to fulfill some of the value adds out there. Okay, so hopefully everyone can see my screen. I'm logged in as in our test system or our demo system as John Patricia, who's an overall assessor supervisor. And I'm going to start the demo by looking at an individual's profile. So this is what the individual would see when they log into the system. So first of all, let me just go through a quick navigation of what you're seeing. So as the individual user, as the assessee, Donald Betty here, I would see at the top of my screen a business card view, but it would give me some of my information, personnel information, like location, organization, and competency roles. I would then get a baseline metric that would just tell me how competent I am at any given time. So before we go any further, let me just talk you through one key concept of Kahuna and of competency management in general. So all of the competencies that a person has to be assessed in or assessed against are assigned to the person by the competency role they're fulfilling, or roles. They could have more than one. So in this instance, Donald Betty, the baseline employee, is a drilling engineer. And because he's a drilling engineer, he's got a set of competencies that have been mapped to the drilling engineer profile. In this case, he has 24 competencies that all been all a part of the drilling engineer profile with expectations because he's a drilling engineer. So when I say 88% competent, out of all the competencies assigned to him, he is being rated as competent in 88% of these. So out of the 24 competencies assigned to Donald, 21 of these are deemed competent. Then we move on to our status header here. So in Kahuna, another key concept is the status of a competency. So let me just walk you through that. There are 6 different statuses a competency could be in at any given time. So it starts off as not assessed. So when a employee or contractor is assigned a set of competencies or a competency role at any given time, there's going to be a set of new requirements that have never been actioned, and these are not assessed. They're to be actioned. Now, from there, if there's a self-assessment being configured, from a system perspective, we can handle self-assessments or no self-assessments, but if one has been configured, once you've completed the assessment, the competency will move to a pending phase. That means the individual contributor's work is done on that competency from an assessment perspective, and then the assessor's task is to go into the system and finish that assessment. So once the assessor has completed the assessment, a competency could either be competent or not competent. Competent is where the employee has been assessed and meets or exceeds expectations, and not competent means that the employee has been assessed and has not reached the expectations. There is a gap, and the employee would be expected to go through a development process to close this gap and become competent. The last 2 statuses I won't spend much time on. These are all about the expiration period of a competency. So a competency can expire. You can be assessed in it, and then 5 years out or however many years out, the competency can be removed and you'd have to be reassessed. So going down at the actual screen itself, so as the end user, you're assigned a set of competencies based on the competency role you're fulfilling. And now this first screen we're going to see, status overview, sorts these competencies into 2 separate buckets. Action needed versus meets or exceeds expectation. Action needed is when you have either been not assessed in a competency, or you've been assessed and you've deemed not competent. There is a gap and you have to do something. You have to action these competencies. So it moves all of these specific line items to the top of your screen. So very quickly you know, I have 3 things I really need to action. Meets or exceeds expectations. This houses all of the competencies where you're deemed competent, where you've been assessed at or above the expectation. So again, we can see all of these, but they're not necessarily as important for me to focus my time and efforts on at this point in time over the action needed competencies. So just quickly going through this, we have broken this section down into a few table columns. So the competency is the competency itself, so borehole stability is one, completion operations is another, and formation pressure is a third. In Kahuna, we've tried to make everything as actionable as possible. So if you see when I scroll over one of these competency, it's clickable. When I click it, a competency profile appears. It just gives you the baseline information for the competency, as well as some of the related learning items. We then have the role. So this is how the competency is assigned to me via the drilling engineer role. The third column is current versus expected. So in Kahuna, we can assess competencies, or competencies can be assessed on multiple different proficiency scales. That's completely configurable, and you as a client can define what that is. But in this instance, we have a 4-level proficiency scale that we're going to rate all of these engineering competencies against, which could be aware, basic, skilled, and mastery. Current versus expected shows you what the expectation is for your role versus where you currently are. So if we look at the second line item here, completion operations, it's rated on a 4-point scale, which is denoted by these 4 bubbles, 3 of which are highlighted in red, which means the expectation is that you're meant to be at the 3rd level, which would be skilled. And I've been assessed and deemed not competent because I've only reached the 1st level, or 0.8% of the 1st level. The status is the 4th column, and this is the tie between the competency line item and the status header. So if you see this first icon is not assessed, hence the 1 not assessed in the status header. 2 not competent, hence 2 not competent, and so on. Again, this is actionable, and this is how you can actually launch the competency assessment form itself. The 3rd column is recommended training, so we have the ability to tie LMS or learning items or reference documents or procedures to competencies or rating elements, which is a lower level of detail of competence. And any related learning item would be shown here, and again, actionable. You can click this item, you can see what this learning item is, and in fact you can launch it into your LMS directly from the screen. And then finally is the expiration period. So if you've been assessed and a competency can expire, then the expiration date will be shown here. Okay, so I'm going to now go into the aggregated view from a supervisor's perspective, and then I'll actually show you the assessment form from that view. So I'm just going to go back to the status matrix. And now if you imagine I'm in as a supervisor rather than the baseline employee. So the status matrix view for a supervisor is an aggregated view of everyone's requirements within your organization or your team. So here I can see 10 people within my purview, 10 of my reports, one of which is the guy we were just looking at, Donald, but then 9 other people. And then on the y-axis of the status matrix are all of the requirements or competencies that have been assigned to anyone in this view. So this won't show everything within your company's catalog. It will just show the relevant items to the people you're currently looking at. If I scroll down, it's just this gives you a real good dynamic, actionable dashboard of your team's competence at any given time. So quickly looking at this screen, we have a set of HSE competencies here, 4 HSE safety critical competencies. I can see quickly that Danielle is not competent in 3/4 of these. This is an area that she is struggling in, and a very important safety critical area. Whereas if I go a few people along, I can see that George is pretty competent in this area compared to his expectations. So this might be a good way for me to quickly think about teaming up George with Danielle and doing some knowledge transfer and some mentoring. So the next thing I'm going to show you is the actual competency assessment itself. So I'm going to launch one quickly. So the competency assessment form, it looks like this. So at the top of the screen, we use some of the personnel and status header information. Then we have some competency details just to show you exactly what the competency is, a description of this competency and how it was assigned to you. We have the assessor actors, which is the workflow. So it starts off with an employee assessment and then goes to an assessment assessment. And then finally we have the actual assessment form itself. And I won't spend very long on this, it's a high-level demo. But basically you go through and you check off where the employee is against the requirements. So this is assessed on a 4-point scale: aware, basic, proficient, and mastery. And each level is broken down into multiple descriptors. And as the assessor, you'd go through and check these off when the employee has fulfilled the criteria. You have the ability to add attachments, to add comments, and to link to learning items directly from the assessment form too. So once you go through and assess, you would complete the assessment, and the status matrix would update with the new icon, whether you've met or and exceeded expectations or have not reached the expectations. So you would get to a green tick or a red stop sign. And very quickly, I'm just going to end with our executive or manager view of the homepage analytics. I'm going to remove a filter and show everyone in the system. So here, from a compliance perspective, we can quickly see everyone who is where everyone is, as from a perspective of my top users, my top competencies, my weakest users, my weakest competencies, people we need to focus on, put time and effort and resources to build up. We have a quick org comparison, so we can see that Norway Productions, how they're doing compared to production support. And these numbers you see here are the competencies per status. So it's an aggregated view of the same status bar the employee saw, but for all competencies in my purview. Okay, so I think we're running out of time there, and I think that was a quick but hopefully helpful overview of the application and how we can tie in some of the compliance requirements that a company needs to go through, and audit requirements, as well as grow on that and create the value add interface and user experience, and to capture the very important data. So I am going to pass the screen back over to Jai now.
Thanks, Tom. So hopefully that was a nice overview of the Kahuna application. As Ashton mentioned, this is the first in a series of webinars that we'll be doing, where we'll highlight other challenges from a business process perspective or opportunities within competency management that we think we've solved for, also from a technology perspective. So we'll be doing webinars on topics such as key analytics relative to competency management, the importance of objective measures and behaviors, and the way to structure competency catalogs, best practices, those types of subjects that really we feel are important to the overall business process, but also have a supporting technology component. So I believe we have a few minutes left for questions, and Ashton, I'm going to ask you if any questions have been logged, we can respond to those, and when time runs out, we can certainly take the rest of those questions and respond to them offline to the entire audience in email.
Yes, we have a couple of questions, but I think we only have time to answer one or two. So the first question that we have is, does an employee have an access viewpoint or permission to see their own personal competency account on screen? Or is it only the supervisor level that has access to it?
Yeah, I'll take this question. That's a good question. So they definitely do have that ability. We can set it up using different role-based permissions and configuration settings. But the way we've seen most of our clients use the system is the employee would definitely have some insight into their competency profile. Whether or not they have the ability to self-assess is a different question, but they generally have that visibility into their competency profile, yes.
Okay. We have time for one more question. So for everyone who asked a question and we don't get to it, just look for it in your inboxes. So the last question will be, how is this different from any other learning management solution?
I could take that one. So we're asked this quite often. I have a learning management system. Why would I need Kahuna? And the answer really lies in the maturity and the data model around competency management versus learning. So most LMSs do a very good job of tracking regulated learning and assigning regulated learning. Where we get into problems is where companies have an expectation around having visibility into competency gaps, technical competency gaps. It goes back to the very first definition we had of competency management. And associated with competency management is also all the complex rules around workflow, assessor assignments, role management, all of those types of challenges really we feel have not been well served by your typical LMS solution. So what we feel Kahuna does is it serves both purposes from the standpoint of combining your view into your competency gaps as well as the learning associated with those competency gaps, while still allowing the LMS or the learning system to do what it does best, which is manage the actual learning content, the registration process, the completion process of learning. So it really is a distinguishing kind of approach, is that Kahuna is structured on a competency-first basis, whereas learning systems typically have competencies that have been kind of related or integrated into the learning model, but they don't satisfy the aggregated view and the complex requirements around specifically performing competency management.
Okay, thank you, Jai. Okay, so we're running out of time. We just want to thank you all for coming and spending some time with us today. I hope that you learned something new from our experts. Our next webinar will be in June, so keep an eye out for that invite. And on behalf of our entire team, again, we want to thank you guys for joining us, and we appreciate your feedback. So please continue to give it because it is helpful and it's the inspiration behind these webinars. So again, thank you, and this will conclude our session for today.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.